right, good to see everybody again. In section 1.3, we're going to be going over basic operations, so addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. We are going to be working on fractions, but we're going to start off adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers, just to make sure that we've got a handle on how everything works. So if we are adding two integers together and they have opposite signs, for example, in A we have -3 plus 7. When we are combining numbers that have opposite signs, we're actually going to be subtracting them. Let me explain. If we have -3 plus 7, we're going to look at both of those numbers and see which one's bigger. Is 3 bigger or is 7 bigger? Well, 7's bigger. So we're going to subtract the two and then take the sign of the bigger number. So 7 minus 3 gives us 4. And since the 7 was bigger, we're going to have a positive 4 for our answer. Let's look at -5 minus 4. Now both of these are negative. Since they're both negative, we're actually going to add them together. So that's going to give us -9. Right here we have -6 minus -5. Whenever we have minus a negative, we're going to change that to a plus. So that's going to become -6 plus 5. Once again, we have different signs. In this case though, the 6 is bigger, right? So when we do 6 minus 5, that's going to leave us with a -1. Let's talk about multiplication, and this also works for division as well. Whenever we're multiplying two integers, if the signs are the same, it's going to be positive. So if you have a positive times a positive, that's positive. If you have a negative times a negative, that's also positive. But if the signs are different, like they are right here with -3 times 7, it's going to end up being a negative number. So -3 times 7 is going to be -21. For example, E, we have -5 times -4. Both of those are negative, so when you have a negative times a negative, that gives us that's right, it's a positive. So -5 times -4 is positive 20. And then the last example is just 8 times 3. And 8 times 3, since they're both positive, it'll be a positive 24. Now let's talk about adding and subtracting fractions. This is very important that you pay attention at this point. When we are adding or subtracting fractions, we have to find a common denominator before we combine them. We cannot just add across, or we cannot just subtract across. We have to find a common denominator like we did in section 1.2. So let's look for a common denominator for 15 and 6. We can use the prime factorization or the multiples if we want to. I'm going to skip all that and just say that the least common multiple is 30 for both of them. So we want to find something that is 30 for both of those. 15 times 2 is 30. So what we do at the bottom, we have to do to the top. So 2 times 2 is 4. 6 times 5 is 30. So 1 times 5 gives us 5. Now that we have a common denominator, now we add the numerators. So 4 plus 5 gives us 9 over 30. Now, before we circle this and make it our final answer, we always want to check and see if we can reduce the fraction. So can you think of a number that goes into 9 and into 30? 3 does, right? So we're going to divide both of these by 3, and that's going to give us 3/10 as our final answer. So after you've found a common denominator and you've added the numerators, we always want to see if we can reduce the fraction after we combine them. In example B, we have -2/7 plus 5. So in this case, we're adding a fraction to a whole number, but we need to turn that whole number into a fraction. And that's really easy. We just put the whole number over 1. And now we're just going to solve it like we did the one before. We find a common denominator, then we combine our numerators, and then we see if we can reduce. Our common denominator for 7 and 1 is going to be 7. So we don't have to do anything to the first fraction. To the second fraction, though, we have to multiply the top and the bottom by 7. That's going to give us 35 over 7. Now we combine our numerators. -2 plus 35, well, the signs are opposite. 35 is bigger though, so we're going to do 35 minus 2, and that's going to give us 33 over 7. Finally, we're going to work with 4/9 minus -5/12. We need to find a common denominator for 9 and 12. That's going to be 36. So 9 times 4 gives us 36. 4 times 4 gives us 16. We've got minus a negative, so we got to just remember that's there. 12 times 3 gives us 36. 5 times 3 gives us 15. So now we have 1636 minus negative 1536. Now remember, what do we do though when we have minus a negative? We change it to a positive. So this becomes 16 over 36 plus 15 over 36. We add those together and we get 31 over 36. Now that cannot reduce, so this is our final answer. Finally, we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing fractions. When you're multiplying fractions, you can just multiply across the top and multiply across the bottom. But if we look at our first example, we have negative 9/10 times 20 over 27. That's going to give you some really big numbers. So there is a thing that we can do called cross-canceling, where we reduce the numbers before we multiply. And in order to do that, we're going to look at the diagonals. So let's look at negative 9 and 27. What's the biggest number that goes into both of those? Well, it's going to be 9. Negative 9 divided by 9 is going to give us negative 1. 27 divided by 9 is going to give us 3. And then we're going to look at the opposite diagonal. We have 10 and we have 20. Well, 10 goes into both of those. 10 goes into 10 one time. 10 goes into 20 two times. Now that we've cross-canceled, these numbers are a whole lot smaller and they're going to be a whole lot easier to multiply. Negative 1 times 2 is going to give us negative 2. 1 times 3 gives us 3. And our answer is negative 2/3. Now we always want to check and see if we can reduce just in case we miss something in our cross-canceling, but in this case we're okay. Let's go to the next example. We have 15/24 times 18 over 25. Can we cross-cancel? Yeah, we can. What's a number that goes into 15 and 25? Well, that's 5. 5 goes into 15 3 times. 5 goes into 25 5 times. What about 18 and 24? 6 goes into those, right? 18 divided by 6 is 3. 24 divided by 6 is 4. So instead of multiplying 15 and 18, you're multiplying 3 and 3. That's a whole lot easier. So 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 5 is 20. We can't reduce this, so this is our final answer. Finally, we're going to talk about division. The first step before you even do any cross-canceling is that you have to multiply by the reciprocal. Now, a lot of times, what I call that is keep, change, flip. So we're going to keep the first one the same. We're going to have 40 over 63. We're going to change our sign to multiplication, and then we're going to flip our second fraction, and that's going to give us 81 over 50. And so now you have a multiplication problem, and we can solve that the same way we solved the other ones. Let's see if we can cross-cancel. 40 and 50, what goes into both of those? 10 does. 10 goes into 40 4 times. 10 goes into 50 5 times. What about 63 and 81? What number goes into both of those? It's going to be 9. So 63 divided by 9 is going to give us 7. 81 divided by 9 gives us 9. Now we're just going to multiply across the top and across the bottom. 4 times 9 is 36. 7 times 5 is 35. So your answer is 36 over 35. This is a good introduction into basic operations. We've added, subtracted, and multiplied integers. We added and subtracted fractions, and we multiplied and divided fractions. A couple of things to remember. Whenever we add or subtract fractions, we have to find a common denominator first. Once you've found the common denominator, you're going to combine the numerators. When we're multiplying fractions, we want to cross-cancel if at all possible because it's going to give us smaller numbers to multiply and there's less chance of making a mistake. And finally, when you're dividing fractions, always remember to multiply by the reciprocal, or as I like to call it, keep, change, flip. See y'all next time.